Well, thank you all for the introductions. And I'm Johanna Blackman. I'm a founding member and I'm now the executive director for Climate to Thrive here on Mount Desert Island, and really happy to be with all of you this evening and inspired to hear about everything that's happening in your different communities. All right, so I'm here to talk about A Climate to Thrive. And as Steve said, we're on Mount Desert Island, and our mission, he already read it, but here it is. Mount Desert Island residents, businesses, and towns working together to achieve energy independence by 2030. And I'll talk a little bit later about what that even means. It's evolved over time, and make MDI an inspiring epicenter of citizen engagement, sustainability, and economic vitality. And I have a feeling that our mission is going to get updated within the next year. So we've been around for 6 years now, and I think it's time to change that. But we were founded in 2015. We got started in the fall of 2015 when a group of citizens on this island started to get together for potlucks. And we were joining together because we were concerned about climate change. We were frustrated by the inaction that we were seeing at the national and international levels, and we wanted to do something. And we had heard about examples like the island of Samso in Denmark. And we thought, we're an island, we have clear boundaries, but we also have some really interesting aspects in that we have the 4 different towns. And so if we can do this working with 4 very different towns through 4 different governments, that's a neat example. And we have, of course, the summer resident population and that kind of dynamic to figure out, and our massive influx of tourists every summer. And so we thought, this could be a very interesting example. And our goal, we set the goal of energy independence by 2030 because it was bold, it was science-based, that like deadline of 2030. And also energy independence was a phrasing that we thought might resonate with the most community members, and was kind of this like concept that seemed very Maine, that like energy independence. But our understanding of that has grown and evolved over time, and I'll talk about that. And so we started meeting, I think monthly, it might have been twice a month. It's hard to remember at this point. I was massively pregnant at the time, and we conceived kind of these 6 different focus areas initially that we were going to try to implement projects in. And that was in energy, clean energy, energy efficiency, zero waste, transportation, public policy, and I am forgetting the 6th one. What could it have been? Energy efficiency, zero waste, transportation, public policy. Well, I will come back to it. I will remember at some point. And so we planned for a launch event in January 2016, and we kind of put out, this is going to be our goal of energy independence, and a little bit about who we were, and this broad invitation to the community. And we had over 200 community members show up, despite the fact that there was a huge football game that day. And I'm letting people in, Steve, as I see them coming in. And so the really cool thing about our launch was we broke into these 6 different focus groups, and we basically asked the community. We had a note taker and we had a facilitator, and we said, here's, this area, for example, clean energy. What are ideas for what we could be doing on this island to shift our island to clean energy as rapidly as possible? And so, there'd be someone in the room who was the curriculum developer for the high school, and she'd be like, oh, well, I know the high school wants to go solar. And so we jot that down. And from those meetings, we got a really robust list of initial projects. And the great thing was that for a lot of those initial projects, we were just serving as a catalyst. There was already interest in the community. So many of these groups wanted to do these types of things, but they were already completely slammed with doing the work that they do. And so, for example, the school was, educating young people and keeping them safe. And they couldn't, they didn't have the capacity to plan and put out an RFP for a solar array. And so we were able to come in and do that for them. And so, in our mission here, that part of like, we work with residents, businesses, I would add organizations and towns in this goal of energy independence is really key. And all along those types of partnerships and pulling people together and making connections and acting as a catalyst has, I think, really been the key to our success. So some of the impacts that we've had over the past 6 years, a lot of work in solar. We've done we're in our second right now, Solarize campaign, which is basically a way of facilitating rooftop solar for homeowners. And so through a Solarize campaign, A Climate to Thrive vets and selects a solar contractor. And the contractor knows in signing up for a Solarize campaign that they're going to be offering a bulk discount for all the homeowners that sign up to receive rooftop solar through that campaign. And we facilitate the process of the solar developer going to the home visit and assessing the roof. And we're here to kind of ask questions and represent the homeowner throughout the process. So we've done 2 of those, and the first one doubled the solar generation on our island in one summer. Since we've started, we've actually increased the solar generation on MDI 5 times over where it was when we began. And a lot of that is due also to large scale solar installations that we've worked on. So we worked with the town of Tremont to develop a larger array that powers all of Tremont's municipal energy needs and is saving the town money over time as well. And we're now in the same process with Bar Harbor, where we're working with the town to develop a large scale array that will power all of Bar Harbor's energy needs. We've also worked to develop a couple of larger scale solar arrays on landfills or on disturbed land that can't be used for another purpose. And those are community solar arrays where community members who don't have the option of rooftop, or for whom like their own installation doesn't work for whatever reason, can join and have ownership. And then we've helped the high school go solar with their own rooftop array that's powering all of the high school's energy needs. And they were the first high school in the state to do so. And the hospital, MDI Hospital, is currently in the process of going entirely solar with their own array, not on their roof. They needed a lot more space than that to power their energy needs, but it will be actually off island. So that's some of the work that we've done in solar, and I'll talk a little bit in a moment about the upcoming work that we have going on. Energy efficiency and optimization is, of course, a huge piece of the puzzle, especially as we look at a future where we are electrifying as many of our kind of energy related things, for lack of a better word, as possible. So as we electrify our cars, as we electrify our heating with things like heat pumps, as we electrify appliances, there's going to be more and more need for energy, for clean energy. And so we want to also be trying to be smart about our buildings and make them as efficient as possible. And this is a particular challenge in the state of Maine, of course, where we have an incredibly old housing stock. So one of the key things that we've done in this area is run weatherized campaigns, which are very similar to a solarized campaign, where we find a contractor, make sure that the best, that we can find to handle this, and have a bulk purchase option available to people for weatherizing their homes. And we actually have one that's going on right now. And there's incredible rebates through Efficiency Maine Trust, and we help homeowners figure out the rebate process. And the contractor that we're working with right now actually does that whole process for the homeowner, which is really great. And just help people with educational events understand the benefits of weatherizing their homes and the ways that they can do so as cost effectively as possible. So that's kind of the key thing that we've done around efficiency and optimization. We've also run heat pump bulk purchase programs as well. When it comes to electric vehicles, that's been a key part of our work. And we actually received 2 larger grants to help establish EV charging corridors throughout down East Maine and down onto the Blue Hill Peninsula. And there was a focus within those on placing the charging stations such that they could be bringing economic business to communities that in areas where they might not otherwise be receiving it. So trying to kind of give communities an economic boost by having this charging station there has been part of that program. And we also, you'll see pictured here, a group of high school students and their teachers standing in front of the high school's new electric bus, which is the first in the state, and are helping our schools figure out more ways to access electric buses. There's funding supports available for that. Zero waste, as I mentioned, was an area that we were focusing on to begin with, and that has continued onward. We have a really robust and active zero waste committee, and we have a horrible waste situation on MDI right now, unfortunately. With everything that has happened with the larger processing plant. And so they've been really trying to help the community figure out how to minimize their waste as much as possible, given the current situation. They were helpful in supporting a group of young middle school girls who brought a plastic bag ban to all of our towns before that went statewide. And they've also worked on a sustainability pledge for local restaurants that looks at reducing single-use plastics, and in the era of COVID, how to have to-go-ware that's as sustainable as possible. And right now they're exploring island-wide composting and really focusing on that reduction of food waste, because of course that's the big contributor to greenhouse gas emissions when you look at waste, is from food waste and from methane gas. Education has been a really important part of our work, recognizing that, we want to, again, be a catalyst and support the community in becoming empowered itself and participating in solutions and implementing solutions itself. And that requires a lot of education, particularly because climate solutions are so nuanced. And it's really important to understand what the community is getting into when it agrees to different types of solutions. So we run a monthly educational program. It's online right now still, and also, pursue other educational opportunities throughout the year. And then we have an internship program that includes a really robust summer internship that has a climate justice component. It networks young climate activists with climate leaders throughout the state, and then also plugs them into ACT projects or supports them in developing their own projects. And then we've recently expanded that into semester internships as well, with a high priority on adequately compensating our interns with a competitive wage. And then we've recognized that, to do the work that we're trying to do in our local community, there are some really important statewide structural changes that need to happen. So we hosted a visioning meeting, I think it was back in 2018, for state energy leaders, looking at what would we like the future of Maine's energy scene to be, to meet climate change. And from that grew the Governor's Climate Council, and Maine Won't Wait can be traced back to that kind of visioning meeting. So, and we're so excited about this new program that is accompanying Maine Won't Wait that we mentioned earlier, was the Community Resilience Partnership through the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation in the Future, that actually brings funding to municipal governments and tribal governments to implement climate mitigation and adaptation work. And so it's very exciting to see some support finally coming from a larger scale for this type of work, and we hope that it continues. Back one, I think. So as we've worked, it's been, clear that we want to have support and points of collaboration available for all different kind of levels of our community. So for homeowners and even renters, for individuals being here to support transitioning their homes to reduce as many of the associated greenhouse gases as possible through things like efficiency, accessing clean energy, ideally through ownership if at all possible, because there's benefits of owning your own clean energy generation, and through electrification, and just, helping them navigate this changing field of climate solutions through education and outreach. And then working with businesses. And so, as I mentioned before, we have a sustainability pledge for businesses, and we're just about to unroll a carbon reduction commitment for businesses that helps them assess their greenhouse gas emissions and focus on kind of high level, large impact solutions that they can implement, often around efficiency, clean energy, and transportation. We work a lot with organizations. We can also help them, transferring their facilities, but also thinking about like how their organization within their existing mission can incorporate climate action and support climate action, because climate change is such an all-encompassing topic that it integrates with everything. And so there's something that everyone, including kind of every mission-based organization, can be doing. Working with specific community groups, going in and talking with them, again, facilitating that questioning of like, what can they do? How can they get involved? Work a lot with the schools, with their eco teams, going in and speaking with different classes, helping them with their own transition, really supporting and trying to elevate youth voices. And then working with our municipalities, and this is something that just has ramped up a lot in the recent years, where our towns, 3 of our 4 island towns at this point, have declared a state of climate emergency. And that declaration was brought forward by young people to the towns and passed. And it required that the towns develop ambitious climate action plans. And so ACT has been involved in writing those climate action plans and helping get them through the town process, making sure that they really incorporate a climate justice component and have ambitious emissions targets, and then helping the towns find ways to fund those plans, including through the new Community Resilience Partnership, and helping the towns get signed up for that. And then more and more, we've started to support similar initiatives statewide. And this is something that's really formalized recently. We get a lot of outreach from different groups that are starting. I'm just seeing an explosion through the state of communities wanting to do something like this in their own format and in a way that fits their community. And so we offer a lot of support in different ways for that work. And that has kind of inspired us to really think about what exactly is it that we are doing within this like vast field of addressing climate change. What is unique about what A Climate to Thrive has done and what these other communities are wanting to do? And so we've started using this phrase a lot of community-driven solutions-focused climate action, that's what we do, that's who we are, that's what we're trying to grow. And when we talk about energy independence by 2030, or we talk about rapidly reducing greenhouse gas emissions, there's lots of different ways that you could do that, but we want to do it in a community-driven solutions-focused approach. And so what that means, the community-driven piece is climate action that prioritizes community involvement in both development and implementation. And it's based in the belief that solutions developed and implemented with a high degree of community involvement will be most effective and impactful and will best meet the needs of the community they are designed to serve. These actions prioritize community ownership of climate solutions and build community equity wherever possible. So an example I'd like to give to illustrate this is, our towns now have these climate action plans that they're developing with ambitious goals. And one way that these towns could achieve their goals is they could aggregate their energy use and subscribe to an investor-owned solar farm somewhere in northern Maine and get their clean energy box checked that way. But that solution and that action would not build any kind of equity for our towns. And so if they can develop a solar array that they actually own, that is, either on an assemblage of rooftops or on land that has been disturbed and can't be used in any other way, that builds equity for the town that can then be used to spearhead other climate action or, in some way utilized to the town's benefit. Similarly, we could recommend that all low and moderate income homeowners who can't afford their own solar subscribe to an investor-owned solar farm, which is great and is a super important and essential solution. But those, we reached a point where we're like, okay, those investor-owned solar farms are going to happen no matter what A Climate to Thrive does. And wouldn't it be better if we were exploring models of community solar that had ownership options for low and moderate income homeowners, and how to do that? What's the financial model that would open up that type of cooperative ownership? So that's where we want to place our time and our energy, is on those solutions that really build that kind of equity and ownership and benefit for our community. And the solutions focused piece, it's kind of obvious when we're engaging in climate solutions, we're engaging in solutions. But, I think it bears saying, because I think that there's, lots of different ways to engage in the topic of climate change, and that we are specifically looking at solutions that are based in communities, and that's either mitigation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, or community adaptation. And often ideally the two really go together, where, the work that we're doing to reduce our greenhouse gases is also building stronger networks of community collaboration that build more resilience as we go. And recognizing that because, as I said, a lot of climate solutions have a lot of nuance involved, there's a lot to understand, community education is a really important part of empowering the community. And so I hit on a little bit of this already, but this focus on equity, how to be engaging in this transition to a clean energy future in a way that builds equity for as many community members as possible. This transition isn't owned by a few investors, that we can really have ownership spread in our community, and accessibility to both the process of developing the solutions, but also implementing and owning them, as open up that accessibility to as many as possible. And also really focused on how can we make this model of action replicable. So this is work that has started to spread, and I'll talk a little bit about it in a moment, in helping other communities start similar initiatives. And then focusing always on, that larger structural justice-oriented change that needs to happen to support this type of work in communities like ours, but all over the place. And so I've said climate justice a lot, and want to talk about what it means to us in our work, and have hit on a little bit of this already. But, asking these questions at each step of our work, and as we think about new projects, asking these questions each time and kind of running them through this list of questions of who's included in developing and implementing climate solutions, who has access to the solutions and benefits from their implementation. Are solutions meaningfully reducing greenhouse gas emissions? So, there's a lot of solutions out there, and some of them don't yet actually do this. And so that's another part of education, is really trying to educate our community to think critically about proposed solutions, and really examine them and ask, like, do they actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or is this kind of a bit of an empty promise or a quick fix that's not going to do the hard work that needs to be done? And then this question is really important. Are solutions allowing powerful polluters to continue emitting while underrepresented communities bear the burden of actual emissions reduction? So, our towns, as they set climate action plans and set emissions targets, they could say that their emissions goal is net zero by 2030. And net zero could mean, and hopefully it doesn't, a lot of countries and states are setting net zero goals, but it could mean, unless you quantify how much you're actually reducing emissions, that you continue to emit, and you just purchase offsets to offset your continued emission. And often those offsets are based in the global south, and displaced communities, or use land that really should be used in another way. And some oftentimes also are problematic in kind of the math of how many emissions they're actually reducing. So, really trying to urge those that we're engaging with to actually reduce emissions, and not support systems that allow pollution to continue. And then this question of how can solutions to climate change simultaneously positively address systems of injustice and oppression, which are happening in all of our communities everywhere to varying degrees. And so as we, think about these structural changes in our community, how can we be looking to work with other organizations, work with other groups, and solve many things at once, ideally. So we've been really thinking about, like, what does this mean for our work going forward if these are our priorities? And so when we think about something like solar, it means exploring cooperative solar models that have innovative financial models to open up access to ownership, to lower and moderate income homeowners, and modeling the benefits of actual ownership of solar to municipalities, businesses, and individuals, and really pushing for the systems to be in place to help increase that access to ownership. When you talk about efficiency, it's things like really making sure all homeowners and business owners, organizations can access efficiency upgrades. And also this piece around supporting development of a local workforce. This is something that we've run into with various of our programs, that, as we think about Maine Won't Wait, so the state's climate action plan, the amount of workforce development that is needed to actually implement that plan is mind-boggling. Even if you just look at something like weatherizing Maine homes, the building performance industry in Maine will have to grow so quickly in a way that really isn't sustainable or fair to the existing business owners. And so they need a lot of support from the state. And this is an opportunity, to be really supplying jobs to people locally. Transportation, this one is the hardest nut to crack, particularly when you think about equity. And of course, EVs right now are very expensive, some of them not as much as others, but really, this is when we bump up against like, this is a hard one to figure out. That means that there's structural changes that really need to happen. And so constantly trying to be tapping into aware of how we can support those structural changes to make sure that more people can access the solutions that are needed. And then just a couple more slides. With the municipalities, we've been really trying to make sure that the climate action plans that they're developing have climate justice principles integrated within them, and that have real zero emission targets as much as possible, as opposed to net zero. And if they have a net zero emission target, that they own that, and they talk about, okay, well, we're going to try to actually reduce our emissions by 80% or 90%. And then we are going to be looking at offsets, but we're going to commit to offsets that are justice oriented, that are as local as possible, and that we really have done our research and understand how those offsets are working. And really including the community in development and implementation. When we work with businesses, it's been really clear that businesses can move so much more quickly than the towns that we're working with, and obviously than the state, but they do need support because they're also overwhelmed, particularly small businesses, and of course right now. So trying to develop those programs like our carbon reduction commitment, where the businesses can get support from a Climate to Thrive to do that work, which many of them, want to do. Using education to continue to empower community engagement. And intergenerational collaboration has been a big part of, what we've been thinking about and talking about since climate change is such a instance of intergenerational injustice, and not just including young people as tokens, but giving them, voting capacity, making sure that they are involved in these planning processes, and actually given a voice and respect, and that they're meaningfully compensated wherever possible. And so we got funding recently to host some conversations about intergenerational collaboration, because we've heard a lot from our interns about what they experience when they move into those spaces. And for example, present to a town council and how that feels, and, the pat on the head that they often get, you are our future, you are going to save this, but, the delivery is not always there. So thinking about that. And then this final piece of, decolonizing climate action, that a lot of the climate action, while incredible, is still happening from this very colonized mindset. And so really looking at that intersection of colonization and climate change. And there's a lot of incredible Native leadership in this state when it comes to addressing climate change, really trying to let that lead the way. So the final piece I just want to share with you all, we are launching a community organizing campaign later this year. This is a year-long campaign, and we're going to be using this really cool Venn diagram tool that I did not find a picture to pop into the slide here, but it was developed by Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, and it helps people map out kind of where their place is in the climate movement, because the whole point is that there's a place for everybody. Climate change is so all-encompassing that there is something for each of us to do from our existing lives, not needing to, change careers or go back to school or learn a lot of new skills, but from within our current walk of life. And so it's this activity where you do your 3 circles, and in one of them you put your passions and your interests, and ideally what brings you joy. And in the next one, you put your talents or other resources that you have to share. And then the third, you put the specific needs of your community around climate change and navigating this transition. And where they intersect, that's where your action is. That's where your purpose is. So that's kind of my favorite thing to do out of all the work that I do. And that is that.